We are at Jetwing Colombo 7 today, enjoying this amazing view from the rooftop of this lovely city hotel, which comes under the Jetwing umbrella, and enjoying a cup of Don's tea, 100% pure Ceylon tea, which is hand-picked, by the way, and packaged to exacting international standards. Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we are positive, daring, different, and back in our lovely Paradise Isle, taking in a good view of the city of Colombo from this rooftop. Later on in the show is a children's author taking serendipity worldwide, an economist being an optimist, and a stunning art exhibition reminding us that we are all pilgrims. We have some great partners on the show. We have Srilanka Life, CDB, The Daily Morning, and of course, Don's Tea. Thank you. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you like us, don't forget to subscribe and follow us.
You can now start a CDB iDeposit digital fixed deposit and experience a range of special benefits from CDB.
With these stunning views of the gorgeous rooftop of Jetwing Colombo 7, we bring you CDB Snapshot and taking a quick look at the week that was. Good news first. Sri Lanka's tourism earnings tops $1.3 billion in the first 8 months of 2023. August clocks in a figure of $499.2 million for worker remittances. Sri Lanka's official reserve assets decreased by 4.4% to $3,598 million in August from July's $3,765 million. Fitch gives Sri Lanka a restricted default rating. Astronaut Frank Rubio sets the US record for the longest space trip, spending 355 days in low Earth orbit. China proposes a new law to fine and detain people wearing clothes that hurt the nation's feelings. Elon Musk's third child is named Tau Techno Mechanicus.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome to Srilanka Life News Capsule. With all the discussions on SOEs and reforming the public sector, we tend to forget that there's a powerful force that remains, and that's the private sector. Although things may be looking a little bleak, corporate earnings tumbled by 45% for the June quarter to 52.7 billion rupees from March's quarter figure of 95.3 billion rupees, making it the lowest earnings period among listed companies at the Colombo Stock Exchange. The 2023 first half earnings were at 148 billion rupees, which is beyond the pre-COVID average of 117 billion rupees. So, what does this all mean? Optimist, economist and expert member at the World Economic Forum, Talal Rafi, discusses why and how the private sector remains the engine of growth. Talal, welcome to Kaleidoscope. Once again, good to have you on the show. The corporate sector has had to tighten belts a great deal given the government's need to adhere to the IMF commitments. What has this done to our engine of growth?
Speaking of the private sector as a whole, they have shouldered the burden of the nation for some time. But looking at it from the government's perspective, the government is also in a tough spot. So let us just, we all have to admit that we Sri Lankans have been living beyond our means for decades. So even a primary budget surplus has only been attained 4 times in 75 years. So that's how bad our financial management is of governments. But the people are also to blame, Politicians have come into power using very populist promises. And we have voted them to power. But right now, as far as the private sector goes, there are 2 concerns. There were 2 concerns. One is higher taxation and also interest rates. As far as taxes go, let's admit that, Sri Lanka has one of the lowest government revenue to GDP ratios in the world at 8%. Even by emerging market standards, this is quite low. So we need to get it up. I mean, in the mid 1990s, it was at around 20%. So we've come down to 8%. The IMF just wants it to be at 15%, which is very reasonable. So there has to be a bit of belt tightening, but also I feel that the tax base also has to be broadened. There are 1 million cars running in Sri Lanka, vehicles, but there are only 30,000 tax files. So that's a puzzle that we need to solve. And as far as the other thing is interest rates. So there is complaints that borrowing costs were high. But as the central bank governor said, you see, borrowing costs are a fraction of the business. But if we let inflation out of control, inflation can increase the price of raw materials, your labor costs, and your borrowing costs. So I think the lesser of the evil options was to hike up interest rates to bring inflation under control.
What areas and opportunities do you see right now which the private sector can take the lead on to grow the economy the way it is?
If we are going to focus more on fast growth and at the same time earning foreign reserves, one would be the IT BPM sector. So even during the past 2 to 3 years, that sector has shown exponential growth. So there is a lot of opportunity in that sector. But for long-term growth, I mean, if you look at how empires rise and fall, you see, it always starts with education. So we need to compete on getting our education systems up to date. As a policy recommendation, I would say for long-term economic growth, focus more on education.
And a look at our market sketch. This week at the Colombo Stock Exchange, the all-share price index remained virtually unchanged, with the average daily turnover dropping to below 2 billion rupees. A strong US dollar led to gold prices weakening to $1,912 per ounce, and WTI oil prices surged to $90 per barrel on news of further production cuts by Saudi Arabia. Hawaii is having a rough time these days, but its latest natural phenomenon isn't dangerous. The Kilauea volcano started erupting again after 3 months of quiet and put on a stunning display of raw destructive power. There's something to be said about the greatest wonders of this natural world. Northeast Greenland's National Park, which is the globe's single largest national park, spans 972,000 square kilometers and is blue and white because it is all ice. A children's author who has touched the hearts and minds of children around the world, given that her English books are translated into Italian, Lithuanian, Turkish and Dutch, is UK-based Sri Lankan writer Nizrana Farooq, who has written 4 books revolving around the magical isle of Serendip, and also read excerpts of her book alongside Queen Consort Kamala. Among her writings is The Girl Who Stole an Elephant, which was so popular that it made the recommended reading list for children in the UK. Then there was The Boy Who Met a Whale, and The Girl Who Lost a Leopard, and The Boy Who Stole a Bear. Nizrana was in Sri Lanka, and I really had to have a chat with her on Let's Talk to find out more about her writing and her love to write children's books. Now, you've studied math for A-levels, you got a degree in computer science, and then a master's in writing. That's quite a change of course, really, when you think about it. How did this all come about?
I mean, it's not actually all that rare, I think, especially with friends that I have in the UK who are also authors. They've all somehow come to it from different fields, because I think it's always better when you're a writer to have some life experience behind you before you start writing. Somehow in Sri Lanka, you don't think of it as a job, do you? Like, I don't know of anyone in Sri Lanka who just does that as their job. They might write books, but they have another job as well. So I just did other things, but when it came to when I thought I have to give this a chance and write, then I thought I needed some training, and then I went and did a master's in writing, and that's how I found my way in.
How does it feel to actually represent Sri Lanka in the children's literature genre in the UK?
I don't know of many Sri Lankan authors in the children's sphere in the UK writing mainstream books. It's sadly not common at all to see this part of the world represented in children's literature. We do have the old books like The Secret Garden, much loved books which are set in, not in Sri Lanka, obviously in India, but all from that kind of a colonial mindset. We need books from Sri Lankan authors and people from this part of the world writing from our point of view. I think already I'm seeing new authors, I'm hearing about them, I'm meeting them through Twitter, Sri Lankan authors and illustrators as well. So I think that is a really good sign and something that we need.
What do you think about AI slowly taking over the world of writers?
It's a big, massive question at the moment, and it's an ongoing discussion, and it's because it's such a rapidly evolving thing. I mean, frighteningly rapidly. This is something that we have to address now. I mean, like most people in the creative industries, I have concerns because of, obviously these things are kind of replacing us. What we want is basically, first of all, it's consent, because it's our work that is feeding into these systems. And then finally also compensation, because we are entitled to fair compensation for our works going into those systems. So yeah, I think this is a huge question at the moment, and because it's also new, we still don't have clear boundaries established.
What inspired you to write about the magical Isle of Serendip?
Primarily because I'm a Sri Lankan. So when you leave the country, generally you have a newfound love and admiration and respect also for the country you left behind, I think, because you see yourself as separate from it, you miss your family, and I think it's a bit of nostalgia to begin with. And also I was then in this unique position where I could see Sri Lanka as an insider and also as an outsider, because I've kind of been both, and that's quite useful, I think. Just that name Serendip, doesn't it evoke such kind of mystery and yes, magical, and it also has that literary history, I think, because it appears in the 1001 Nights. I think Sinbad the Sailor sails to Serendip on 2 of his 3 voyages. So that all feeds into this kind of magical image that I wanted to use. And knowing what I do about Sri Lanka and the locations there, because I have 4 books set in them, and each of them is set in a slightly different location. So the first book is a kind of a jungle book, so set in a rainforest. So you see kind of Singharaja, and there's a little bit of Sigri as well. And then the second book is set by the coast, so it's near Galle, and it's a kind of a coastal book. The third book is set in the mountains, and then the last book is set in the north of the country. So you see kind of arid jungles and all that sort of thing.
I'm at the Barefoot Gallery today, and on Life in 60, it's all about running rivers, Pilgrims of Place. It is the exhibition of Kueni and Anup Vega. Kueni is a Sri Lankan Australian diasporic artist based in Australia, and Anup is a contemporary drawing artist based in Nalanda. They explore themes of belonging, regeneration and migrant identity through the connection of waterways in running rivers and the healing power of those waterways.
This work came forth because of my experience of racism and bullying in Australia as a woman of culture and color. And I found walking with the river a source of healing for myself, where I reconciled and found my decolonized body through allowing my senses to inform my mind.
When Queenie invited me to this running rivers, it's a beautiful way of exploring the earth and the land and the planet we live and survive.
Working with Pilgrims of Place is how I walk the country, and I also worked with the Indigenous elders in Australia at the time. And with this, it was a journey of remembering. Coming back to Sri Lanka after 24 years, because it's a journey of renewal, recalibration and regeneration for myself.
I like glitters, sparkling and shiny things. And because that through that shine, it helps me to go beyond or travel to that light, experience a vision that is different to this known reality. So this is other side is a mystery.
So this body of work that I have worked on Pigments of Place. I worked with pigments from my village in Bibila, Sri Lanka. I've also worked with the local deities in Vivida, the female deities and the masculine deities. And I've also incorporated ritual drawing in these artworks.
The end of the week approaches. Grab a hot cup of Dawn's tea, sit back and relax, and await Kaleidoscope next week.